On Convos with Cody 25, I have my longtime friend Gianleonardo Neglia on. John used to work for the Blue Jays as a clubhouse assistant, to the best of my recollection, from 2008 to, I can't remember, it was around 2021 or so, I might be wrong. But John was first the ball boy, and then he was the bat boy, and I worked alongside with John for many hours in the clubhouse, and now he is the sporting director for the Las Vegas Lights, which is the soccer team that Jose Bautista now owns. This has been a very fun conversation to have. I'm very excited for you to watch it. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you could hit follow. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could subscribe, like, comment, that would be really cool. Thank you very much. So John, you spent many years working in baseball for the Blue Jays. We quote unquote maybe kind of work together at different times. I'm very curious as to the pivot going from baseball into soccer. I know that soccer is your true love, but I want to know, all the years that you spent working behind the scenes for the Blue Jays, what transferable skills did that teach you, being around athletes at the highest level and so forth, executives at the highest level, that allow you to do your job better now today?
Man, so many. I mean, I think when people, when you think of the glamour of working in professional sports, look, it's awesome. We all love it. Um, you have to have a passion for it, but it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of missed family celebrations and outings with friends and everything like that. And I think one of the first things that I learned working in sports was that it's a commitment that you got to make first and foremost. In terms of transferable skills, I think, being fortunate to be around the day to day with the Blue Jays gave me tremendous insight into the way an athlete thinks, um, their preparation, their day to day. Obviously, baseball and soccer are two very different things in that one is played every day, one is played once a week. So, of course, there are differences, but athlete mentality, athlete preparation, front office mentality, business side, being in the clubhouse with the Blue Jays was kind of the perfect storm of seeing how everything kind of swirled around. And, I think, truth be told, when I first started with the Blue Jays, I never expected to be there as long as I was. But it just kind of kept you going back. And those are probably the biggest takeaways, right? Just being able to have an understanding from an on the field, behind the scenes level has really helped me in my transition into a front office role.
You would recall when you were working with the Blue Jays, observing obviously a lot of different personalities in the locker room. And I know that when you are responsible for making sport related decisions, whether you're working in hockey or baseball or soccer, it doesn't matter. There are certain intangibles that you may take into consideration with different roster moves. And fit or chemistry, however you want to phrase it, on a team is a big component of that. Is there anything that sticks out to you that, again, when you were, let's say, the bat boy, and you were even during the game observing things from the dugout, just again in terms of maybe how different teammates interact or maybe the interaction with the coaches, what about exposure to that and being able to better assess intangibles for roster decisions that you now make?
Yeah, look, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to phrase it, I know firsthand what character can do to a locker room, both good and bad. So I think I have ample examples of both, and I think you do as well. And so I I very much always have that front of mind when making roster decisions, when making sporting decisions, because I'm just so cognizant of the effect it can have on a room. I've seen what a healthy room results like on the pitch or on the field, and I've seen what an unhealthy room can put out on the field as well. So when making those types of decisions, character is always, always, always front of mind. Obviously, you look at talent, you look at how can this player help us in this role or in this position. But if it's not the first, it's the second or third question. It's, okay, let's get some character references. What's he like in the room? What's his personal life situation? Has he gotten into trouble off the field in the past? What's that been like? So that is a very, very big component of the, quote unquote recruitment process or decision making that we do.
It must also evolve over time, right? Because you might have an idea of a certain player let's say going into a season, and then maybe some sort of unexpected dynamic happens, whether that's positive or negative, whatever happens in the moment, because then, they meet new teammates, or maybe maybe they really get along with the coach. Is there anything that you might call that could be like a secret sauce per se of just having that gel with a team that you look for? Or what is, if I can phrase the question differently, what is it that you hope that your ideal locker room is like in terms of gel?
If I had to have a wish list of what my ideal locker room would be, it would be one that's very familial, one that guys enjoy hanging out with each other, get along with coaches, do a lot of things together away from the field, have a good mix of veteran and youth that blend well together. That's, a perfect world scenario. One thing that I will say is a little different in soccer than maybe in baseball, just with the sheer number of players available to you in different leagues in the world. You're not just pulling from this small pool of Major League Baseball players. I'll probably put a little bit more of an importance on locker room and team character and compatibility versus talent. Not a full trade, 1-for-1, but if I'm looking at two players and maybe player A's got a little bit more talent or is a little bit more proven than player B, but I know what I'm getting from player B in terms of what he's going to provide off the field and how he's going to integrate into the room, I'm going to lean more towards player B. So I think having those experiences, seeing it firsthand with the Blue Jays, has made me realize and really understand the importance, of cohesion. I mean, look, we could talk about what it was like in 2015 and 2016 with the Jays and how vastly different that was from, say, I don't want to say specific years, but other teams.
Earlier years.
Later years. So, when you go through an experience like that and you see the results of what comes from that, it's addicting, and it's, it stays with you.
But what took you by surprise the most in terms of learning on the fly? Maybe something that you just, with all the preparation, the schooling, the exposure that you've had to sports, that you just weren't prepared for, that you just had to learn on the fly?
Dealing with people.
It's hard.
It's not easy. People
It's the
are
hardest
different.
thing arguably
Everyone
to
is
do.
different. And you don't realize, like, nothing that you learn in school, nothing that you experience either playing the game or having worked in it can really prepare you for interaction and the day-to-day with people. Like, I always joke around with friends that, in the role that I'm in now, at times it feels like glorified babysitting. And, whether it's the player directly, whether it's coaching, whether it's their agents, whether it's your bosses on the team, owners and other things, sometimes it is that. And being able to manage all of these personalities, deal with all of these personalities, problem solve things, to sometimes things that you don't even think are problems, but are problems for others. That's probably the biggest piece that you can't plan for it until you're in it.
Yeah, I think if I can relate back to baseball for a second, if you take the manager's role, and for those that maybe don't follow baseball as much, I mean, equivalent of a head coach, their decision or their big responsibility is making lineup decisions for the most part anyway, or it used to be, and and making in-game decisions, which again, at least used to be. But also, it's aside from that, I always thought that the manager's biggest responsibilities were managing personalities and dealing with the media. And then in a similar capacity, you would have, let's say, the general manager of a sports team. And of course, they're making roster decisions. But again, they're managing a lot of personalities, whether it's in the locker room, in the office. And again, general manager's other big responsibility is dealing with the media. So what did you learn, I guess, about delegation? Because I'm sure that you quickly realized that you can't do everything, even though you might want to.
Delegation is one of my favorite things. Because it's just, honestly, Cody, it's just so important in my position, in my role. Sometimes you need that buffer, and you need that separation from certain things. You can't have it all the time. But there are, as you know, having been around the locker room and having a father who's been a manager of a department and responsible for things, you can't do everything. You can't. And if you try to, you become worse at other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing when to delegate certain things, knowing that there are certain things, and look, I'm not saying this to try and be arrogant, but there are just certain things that are just beneath me now that I just don't need to worry about. And I shouldn't have to worry about. I shouldn't waste my mental energy worrying about them. And I think at least from my case, I'll speak for myself, when you first get the role as the head guy, you try to worry about everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that you've got to have your first hand in every facet of the organization. And while it is my duty and responsibility to oversee everything on the sporting side, there are certain things that I will delegate to my team manager. I will let my head of scouting worry about. I will let my general secretary tell me. And kind of just trust them sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like, as someone who operates a business just by myself right now, I already start to spot which things I can't wait to delegate eventually. I can't yet, but I've already started to understand what given my skill set and given whatever I may or may not be qualified to do, how can I leverage my time the best? And sometimes, even though I may want to be hands-on, let's say with certain, I don't know, financial bookkeeping or things like that, which I think is important because for you to understand cash flow and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, one day I should be too busy to do this. So I wanted to ask you, just before our conversation goes a little too off the rails, I wanted to ask you about pivoting from baseball to soccer. So and please just fill in the gaps. I know that you went to school over in Europe for basically what you're doing now, and then you worked, I believe it was for one season with a team in Venice. Can you just elaborate in terms of how you got from baseball to where you now are with the Las Vegas Lights?
Yeah. I'll kind of start back from the very beginning. Like when I got the job with the Blue Jays, as you know, you said it earlier, soccer has always been my passion. It was the sport that I grew up playing. It's what I know. At that time, soccer was still very much in its infancy in terms of professionalism in Canada. I started working with the Blue Jays in 2008. Toronto FC didn't become a team until 2007. So there really wasn't much of a pathway into soccer. So all throughout my tenure with the Blue Jays, you always had that one eye on how do I get myself into the soccer landscape. I thought that being involved in a professional sport would help me eventually transition. It took a lot longer than I thought, but it did help me. I did have to go back and do schooling. My original undergrad was in history. I very quickly learned that was not going to help me in any way, shape, or form unless I wanted to be a teacher. And I can assure you I did not. And so I went back. I did a separate undergrad in sports management, and I followed that up with a specific master that specialized in the business side of soccer. For this master, I went and did it in Europe. It was a university based in Lisbon. It's called the Nova School of Business and Economics, and they're in partnership with the Football Business Academy. And that's where I did my master's. It was really cool. That, landing in Venice, and I was there for two seasons. The first 6 months I was there as an intern through the school, which was a tremendous help for me.
Okay.
And then once that internship ended, I guess I didn't piss too many people off at the club. They wanted to keep me. And then it turned into a full-time job in which I was there for an additional 18 months on top of that. So that transition, and look, full transparency, Cody, when shopping around where I wanted to go to school and do this master, because there were a couple of different options, knowing that the Football Business Academy offered a guaranteed internship in the industry was a major deciding factor, because I do think real hands-on world experience is incredibly vital. And so I think once I got to a point with the Blue Jays that, and this, we saw changes happening from an organizational standpoint, restructuring of certain departments, and just a shift in the way things were being done, then that is what made it easy for me to walk away and just say, you know what, now's the time for me to go back, do the schooling, and really start my career in soccer. I had a great run in baseball. It ended up being 11 years that I worked in baseball. I enjoyed it. I got to do a lot of cool and great things, but I knew that it was time to make the move and start the career in soccer. And, time goes by quickly. It seems like it wasn't that long ago that I made that pivot and made that transition. But it's, almost 5 years now. And so time goes quickly. I'm quickly embarking or finishing up my third season here with Las Vegas. As I said, I was in Venice for 2 years before that. So, the pivot was not easy. Was scary as well, because, I decided when you do make that decision to go back to school, I'm a little bit older, right? Like I'm almost 30 at that time. Sorry, over 30. I'm 31 when I make that decision to go back. That's not the youngest for school, but I felt it was what I needed, and I'm happy I did it, because it ultimately helped me get to where I am now.
So I can tell you that law school prepares you for the profession, but there's a lot that you learn on the fly, and they don't prepare you for everything. And in fairness to, I think, any school, I don't think they really can. I think you just kind of have to just get in the thick of it at a certain point and start to figure it out. However, I can still point to certain things that I learned in school that did prepare me for the quote real world or the real profession, however you want to phrase it. Is there anything that jumps out to you that you learned in school, especially when you say that you were learning specifically about the economics and business side of soccer, so a particular sport? What was it from the school, from the classroom, that you can actually point to say that was, even if it's just one class, like what was the most useful thing that you think you took out of school?
For me specifically, learning about sponsorships and how they affect the day-to-day of soccer clubs was very eye-opening. soccer is unlike any sport in the world in which players can be bought and sold like assets.
Right. Okay. I didn't think about that.
And so there is the business side, the economic piece to that is incredibly vital to running a self-sufficient soccer. And so, that one facet of my schooling that really was interesting to me, as I said, was, learning on how can you utilize sponsorships to offset cash, to offset expenses, whether that is through partnerships with food providers, hotel partners, travel, airlines, destinations for preseason, and just understanding where sponsorship can provide value to a soccer club and how to utilize that. Understanding the importance of TV money and revenue there, and how not so much in American or North American soccer, but in European soccer where there is promotion and relegation from between the top leagues and down the pyramid. How do the different values assigned to TV contracts in different leagues play into how you can build your roster? Do you focus more on youth players with the mentality of selling them versus a little bit more proven players and trying to win, understanding the balance between the two? So I think that's why there is, these school programs, these courses designed specifically for the business side of soccer, because it is completely unique and completely different from North American sport and how they operate from a business standpoint.
So are you able to leverage that knowledge with your job now? I know that you're obviously predominantly making soccer based roster decisions, but in terms of the business side, you just went on for probably about 1 or 2 minutes, and I found it very interesting about sponsorships and everything. So is your role kind of hybrid, or are you more so just sticking in the lane of soccer decisions?
No, so my role specifically as sporting director is I oversee the sporting department. Now, I work in very close collaboration with our business director and CEO, who is responsible for all business matters of the club. But we have daily interaction and weekly meetings about, hey, our sponsorships team is looking to close this partnership with company X. Is the team looking for food providers this year? Is the team looking for a gym partner? Is the team looking for an airline partner? And so, what do we need? Do we need anything in terms of equipment? Are there certain companies we should go and reach out to about sponsorships? So very close collaboration with the business side.
And I'd imagine too that from a budgeting standpoint, you're going to have to understand, okay, so what's the cash flow coming in from some of those sponsorships? How much money do we have to play with? What are our expense? So is that something that you might go back and forth with the business team about too, in terms of just understanding, I guess, how much room you may have? I don't know, maybe it's you want to sign a certain player and maybe you have to dip in a little more to the budget. Can you elaborate on just how maybe some of that interplay works?
Yeah, just for example, knowing full well that in a season of 34 matches, 17 of those are road games, which means you're flying 17 times. So what is the cost of 17 flights? Okay, the cost is X. Hey, can we approach Southwest Airlines, United, Delta? Can we get any sort of a sponsorship or kickback in cash or anything like that that can help us cut that number down? We train 5 days a week. We got to provide meals for our players post-training 5 days a week. That's going to cost us X. Okay, can we approach any companies that want to sponsor, that want to partner with us? And maybe we throw their branding and their logo on our jerseys. And can that get us 1 or 2 days covered in terms of food? What's the difference look like financially there? Right? So there's a lot of different ways in which these sponsorships can affect the bottom line and can affect what you have to fork out.
Maybe you could elaborate as well on some of what I might call hidden costs, just that the average sports fan may not consider. And I'll give you an example, and you can correct me if I'm just recalling any of this wrong. But I remember one time I heard Jose talking about when, let's just say, maybe a player goes down with an injury, and then obviously then so that player's going to be injured, and then there's another roster spot that opens up. Then you bring on another player, and again, please tell me if I'm wrong. What I understand is your team's expense on salary just went up because the player that's hurt, I'd imagine, is still being compensated. And then now you have an extra player that has to fill their spot. Am I making any sense? Am I recalling any of this? And are there any sort of other maybe like hidden things that just the average sports fan may not consider?
I mean, with our specific situation and where we don't have a second team, you're right? Because we have to fill that roster spot. I don't have an academy or a quote unquote minor league team that I can pull from to fill that spot while player X is recovering. So that isn't an added expense. And I think that is very much the case with a lot of second division American soccer teams. And so, yeah, those are sort of the unexpected costs that, I mean, I've literally got a section of my budget yearly that is literally titled unexpected costs. Because
Really?
there,
Okay.
yeah, because there are just certain things that will come up throughout the course of a year that you're going to have to deal with. I mean, it's hard to put a true number on what that, what you want to budget for in that number, but there are certainly things that will come up that you haven't anticipated.
Right. And then you have to trust that there's that reserve built up so that
you have to have that budgeted.
Right. So
sure.
you're not waiting around maybe for cash flow to then spend it on, I'll make this up, I don't know, some last minute flight that your team needs to book because you have a player that's going to join the team that didn't fly with the team. I'm making this up, but just little things like that can happen.
I've got a head of scouting that, like, you don't know what players from what country or what team are going to become available to you, and can you acquire them? Like, I can't be scrambling for $1,500 if I got to send my head of scouting on a trip to go watch this player play. Right. So there are, the budget has a number of different categories in which you try to plan. And as you said, you don't want to be going week to week to your owner for cash flow, or I need this, I need this, I need this.
What about the context of operating in Vegas specifically? I know, again, that your primary role is making sporting-based decisions, but just being involved with your business department, what is it about that city that maybe gives a sports team like yours unique advantages? I mean, obviously there's a lot of casinos there and there's a lot of people moving in and out. It seems like it's more about, if you can say, like a tourist place. Obviously there's a lot of people that live in Vegas year round, but there's a lot of people that are in and out every day that only stay for 3 or 4 days. So does any of those dynamics maybe affect how you can run your team there? And again, I would just primarily ask, like, what advantages would that give a club like yours?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think having, companies like MGM, Caesars, Station Casinos, all these major corporations here in the city could provide a certain advantage, specifically in terms of sponsorship and in terms of, brand awareness and recognition and things like that. One thing that I'll point to, this one is a bit of a disadvantage when you look at some of the other teams in our league. Playing in Las Vegas, playing in the middle of nowhere. Our closest rival, or the closest team to us within our league, is a 4-hour drive. Whereas if you look at, some teams that are based in Florida or based in the Midwest, based in California, you have a closer proximity to a lot of teams so that maybe you don't have to fly everywhere. We don't have the luxury of having interstate rivals or games in which we can bus that are going to be less than a 5-hour bus ride.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a disadvantage. One thing that, again, specific to Vegas and a lot of the California teams, when we have to go travel east to play teams, you're losing 3 hours and you're losing hours worth of travel. So the likelihood is that if we're playing on a Saturday, and most of the time you travel the day before a game, when we're traveling east, we're probably traveling the Thursday. Because if you're traveling the Friday, you're getting in at midnight, 1 a.m.,
Mm-hmm.
depending on
Mm-hmm.
how far east you're going. And you've now disrupted your player's sleep. You've lost the ability to train the day before the game, have a proper meal. So you almost
Mm-hmm.
have to incur an extra day expense in hotel because you don't want to lose a competitive advantage. So those are just some of the disadvantages of being in Las Vegas. As I said, there are plenty of positives as well. You mentioned we talked about the casinos and the ability for sponsorship with all of the different companies. You have the ability to cater to a lot of different nationalities and a lot of different types of people because of how much of a transient city this is and how many visitors it gets. And so there's a lot of things that you can do. Being in a city like Las Vegas, you're also competing with the entertainment capital of the world. So
Yeah.
on any given night, there are 100 different things that someone can choose to do in Las Vegas. So you have to be mindful of that, and you have to find a way to provide value for your product to the consumer. So, yeah, it's a fascinating city to do business in. There's no doubt.
What about in terms of dealing with ownership? Obviously, you and I have had a relationship with Jose Bautista for a long time now. Jose didn't play soccer, but he played at the highest level in his sport, being baseball. I feel like it must make certain things easier. And I don't recall exactly how the ownership structure is, but at least when you have to talk to Jose about different things, dealing with an owner that was a professional athlete, I feel like there's probably certain things that you don't have to explain to him that maybe someone else in your position that has an owner that maybe has only worked corporate their entire life, their dynamic might be a little bit different. Can you just maybe elaborate in terms of how it makes your job maybe easier, whatever, when you have to go to Jose and talk to him about whether it's an injury or whatever it is that you might need to shuffle around?
No, for sure. I mean, look, there's so many things will come up throughout the course of the year. So many things will break. So many things will need to be replaced. And having an owner that played a professional sport, that knows what it's like to be in a locker room, in a clubhouse with teammates, knows the importance of travel, recovery, preseason, meals, all of these things, it makes it so much easier because I don't have to explain myself. I can say, hey, I need budget to buy this product for the training room, this product for my equipment manager, and this product for the team locker room itself. And as a player, he knows what those things are. Firstly, he knows why they're important, so I don't have to explain it to him.
Yep.
And in some cases, he has connections or relationships with certain companies that we can maybe get those things at a discount. So, so much easier than having to go to some, stock exchange guy about why my massage therapist or physiotherapist needs this versus not. So absolutely there are advantages to that. Absolutely.
How does it feel to be in a decision-making capacity of any sort of sports team, which I'm sure is something that you have potentially dreamt about for a while, whether it was soccer or baseball? I mean, I remember when you used to work in baseball, we would talk about, well, what would you do if you were in charge of this roster decision, whatever. And now that you're actually in the shoes of the person that gets to make a lot of those decisions, how does it feel? And Do you ever feel a lot of pressure?
You do. This is something that you wrestle with from time to time, because ultimately, from a sporting perspective, every decision, every final decision that needs to be made from a sporting standpoint is mine. I am, however, still responsible to an owner who owns the club. And you also have staff and others that your decision affects. So early on in my role here, I would try oftentimes to appease as many people as I could. You try to make the decision that's going to make the most people happy.
That's hard, man.
And then you start to realize that you're never going to make everyone happy. Ever. It does not matter. I can tell you, Cody, this pen is black. There will be someone out there that says, no, it's a light shade of gray. And that is just the reality. There's never going to be a universally accepted, agreed upon decision. And so the one thing that you learn is that as the final decision maker, you got to make the decision that you can live with. And that ultimately, you'll have to answer for. And sometimes it's not going to be the one that makes the most people happy. Sometimes you're not going to make anyone happy. But if you got to be strong in your conviction. You got to go with what you think is right, because we're in an industry where you're here one day and you're gone the next. Decisions can be made very quickly. Situations can change very quickly. So you ultimately, as the final decision maker, you have to make the decision that you can live with. One other thing that I'll say on top of that is one of the most important things someone like me has to have in this role is you have to have people you trust in your surrounding sporting staff or surrounding environment. You have to have, in my case, a head of scouting that you trust. You have to have a team manager that you can trust and rely on. You have to have a secretary that you believe in, because then making these decisions becomes easier.
We had talked earlier about delegation and now the pressure of making decisions. And I was just going to say, from my own standpoint, I feel like I'm at the point in my life now where I would rather die on a hill that I fought on as opposed to maybe going with what someone else thinks and being wrong. I can just live better with if I made the best decision at the time with the best information that I had and I end up being wrong, I'm okay with that. It's when I don't trust myself and I go maybe with what someone else thinks, and then what I thought originally was the better way to go, that kills me.
For sure. And look, sometimes whether it works or doesn't, like at the end of the day, you've got to, when you put your head down on the pillow at night, like you've got to live with the decisions you make and you've got to be okay with them. And, with sports, sometimes they'll work and sometimes they won't. Like you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. You're never going to get it right 90% of the time. That's the beauty of sports.
Oh, yeah. I mean, from baseball, it was an everyday sport, obviously. And it's like, hey, the next day you got another game. I know soccer is a little bit different. You play once a week. But I also wanted to ask you, what has your role taught you about leadership? Because you oversee a lot of people, it sounds like. And then you have a roster full of players too. And you are going to walk into a room and there's going to be maybe 50 people that might look at you to be like, okay, like, what are we doing here, kind of thing. So what is
consistency?
What have you? Yeah, consistency.
Consistency is the biggest thing in leadership, Cody, because you're going to have peaks, you're going to have valleys. There's going to be great days. There's going to be horrible days. As the leader of the organization, the best thing you can provide is consistency. A level of consistency and understanding and support so people know what they're going to get from you. Not everyone's going to like you, obviously, when you're in a position like this, but consistency and being as honest as you can be. And sometimes honesty is not going to make people feel warm and fuzzy, But as long as you're consistent and as long as you're forthcoming, those are the two biggest things in leadership.
If I can revert the discussion potentially just back to baseball to close it out, I guess, in the next 5 or 10 minutes, but what is it that you miss the most about your time working in baseball with the Blue Jays, being in the locker room?
Ooh, I think I just miss the locker room. I think when you get into a front office role, the locker room is kind of, off limits to you. Like you're responsible for it, but the locker room is for the players. That's their domain. That's their clubhouse. They kind of run, them, the coaches, the support staff, the clubbies. That's their area. And I think I just miss the bond there of being in the fight day to day. And, baseball was literally day to day. And so that's one of the things I miss. I think to just how they sometimes say ignorance is bliss, the bliss of just worrying about winning that day. And that's the only thing that you got to worry about. And the only thing on your mind is the game coming up and winning that day. You don't have 100 other things in your planner that you got to get to or got to accomplish by the next week. So I would say that bond, that camaraderie, is one of the things I miss in baseball. I miss the downtime. It's a long season, but it's also a long off season. In soccer, we don't have that. Seasons are 10 months. And then, you get your couple weeks off and you're back at it.
Do you have a favorite memory from when you were either in the clubhouse, bat boy, particular game, particular moment?
I mean, the easy answer in terms of particular moment is the bat flip.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's so many different reasons.
Yeah.
And if you'll indulge me, if you got 2 minutes here, I can explain some of the personal reasons for me. Forever and ever and ever, I will be able and be the only person to be able to say that I picked up the bat that was flipped.
That is very true.
I mean, when he flipped that bat, I picked it. That is something that no one else on this earth can say.
You remember the place shaking?
I mean, vibrating to the point where I was.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember the moment, Cody. I remember being on the bench, seeing him swing, seeing the trajectory of the ball from the third base dugout, and knowing from that trajectory, understanding that it was gone.
Yeah.
And then blacking it. And then the next moment, the next thing I remember after that trajectory is exactly what you said. I just remember being back in the dugout and the building shaking and going like, what the hell is going to happen? And so that moment, for those reasons, for the culmination of what it took to get to that, my first year with the Blue Jays was 2008. That moment happens in 2015. So it's 8 seasons into my tenure. That's 20 plus years that the Jays hadn't been in the playoffs since. So just the culmination of all of that, full transparency, the financial ramifications of what that meant for a mid 20-year-old kid, and knowing that there was some playoff money that was going to be distributed to us and what that could potentially do for me setting up, my future.
Yep.
So in terms of an individual moment, I have to go to that. And that's probably, probably my favorite time with the Blue Jays, mid 2015 to through the end of 2016. I just think the group that we had, in terms of both players, in terms of staff, clubhouse, front office, all of us, we all got along. We all enjoyed each other's company. We all hung out away from the field. They're all friendships. They're all people that I'm working for one of them right now. I don't think that that's by accident. I don't think that that's coincidental. I think it speaks to the relationships that we forged and the bonds that were forged. And so, I look back to the Blue Jays, and that's what I'm always going to remember.
Is there one very specific, maybe funny story you care to share? I mean, I have one in mind, but I'll maybe let you answer the question first.
Does it involve Bret the Hitman Hart?
You know what? This one actually wasn't what I was gonna. That was not what I was gonna say. It did cross my mind. I do remember that one. You missed that one. You missed one Bret Hart story, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know that I have one. I mean, there's been so many, Cody. I mean, we talk about Bret the Hitman Hart. We talk about Charlie Sheen.
Oh,
we talk about Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's so many. So I don't know. I think I'd be doing a disservice to just pick one. Although,
Fair enough.
growing up as a wrestling fan, I mean, Bret the Hitman Hart putting a clubby in a sharpshooter that's going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, for anyone listening, Bret Hart, I think it was my brother that suggested. My brother was not there, and then you just missed it, and I don't think you were too happy about it.
No, I saw the pictures. Thank God for that, but I would have loved to have seen it live.
There's one moment that I remember, and I'll edit this out if you don't want it in, but do you remember? I'll lead you to it. Let's see if you recall. Do you remember it was during the 2015 playoffs? It was in Kansas City. And there was a bit of tension. There was a bit of tension with one of their pitchers at one point. I think Tulo was at bat, if I recall correctly. It was, if I pronounce his name right, it was Jordana Ventura, may he rest in peace. But I remember there was a bit of tension at one point. and I remember, I think that you remember, I remember you telling me a story about how I guess you might have gone out to get Tulo's stuff. And I think that you might have like looked at him and said something. You kind of like got in the mix a bit.
I ended up in the benches playing Brawl.
No, I don't. Well, that maybe I don't recall. Like, you tell me.
I'll be honest with you. I don't remember specifically anything with Jordana Ventura. I remember just being somehow brought into the Sam Dyson post bat flip brawl. And in fact, There's a pretty cool picture that I still have on my phone of me in the mix of it, like right in the middle of it.
Right. I forgot about that. That happened. Was it? It was before the next batter after Jose, right? Like the game hadn't actually fully resumed yet.
No, Edwin was at bat, and Edwin was trying to calm the crowd down because, as we said, the building was shaking, and Sam kind of came off the mound and went right, got into Edwin's face, and then benches cleared, and I just happened to be there, and I was ready to go. I was swinging.
Well, where were you geographically while this was going on?
I mean, I was right behind Edwin. And I don't know if it's because I was handing the umpire baseballs to reload him, or if it's just because I was in my spot there in front and I just got pushed in with all the players swarming out. But I found myself right in the middle there, and I wasn't going anywhere.
Last one. We've talked about this before. One of your responsibilities when you're a bat boy would be to also give the umpire baseballs. And sometimes the timing of that wouldn't be so great if someone started to argue while you are about 3/4 of the way from the dugout to the umpire, and you're kind of in no man's land where it's like, do I keep going? Do I go back? Do you have any particular moment that you can maybe share that might elaborate on that scenario that I just kind of drew up in my head, if anyone's maybe struggling to picture it?
There was one particular moment I'll never forget, because it's probably the closest I ever got to being thrown out.
Okay, I gotta hear this if I haven't already.
And it's one of my, and I'll go on record, I don't care, one of my least favorite umpires of all time. His name is Vic Carapazza.
Oh yeah, great guy.
And when he threw out in a span of 2 minutes, manager, pitcher, and catcher.
Which game was that?
It was Stroman was pitching. He threw Stroman out. He then immediately threw Martin out because he kind of made this kind of gesture when he threw him out, and then immediately proceeded to throw the manager out. And Russ had to be held back. And DeMarlo's he's fighting for dear life, trying to keep Russ Martin back from killing Vic Carapazza. And immediately upon the end of that, the building is just hammering him with boos. And he gives me the sign he needs 4 baseballs. I walk up there and I hand him the 4 baseballs. I look him dead in the eye. And I just go, Jesus, Vic, fuck. Sorry if I can't swear on this podcast.
Yeah, you can. No, you can.
You can edit that out, but look him dead in the eye and be like, what are you doing, man? And walk back to the bench, to which he's just staring at me like, did you really just say that? But he was an awful lot.
Well, I think that's a great story to end it on, John. I know that we spent so much time together in the clubhouse over. I actually forgot that you started in 08, and I thought it was 09, but it was 08 you were ball boy, and then it was 09 that you started as bat boy. So I do recall that now. And we've spent so much time together, whether it's in the clubhouse in Florida and everywhere else. And I'm very happy that you have found something that aligns with your passion and aligns with your ambitions, because I know as much as you enjoyed working for the Blue Jays, I always knew that you wanted something more than that. And it seems like, at least for now, you found that. So I'm happy for you.
Yeah. And look, one thing, I'll thank you, firstly. And then secondly, for anyone listening, I'll just say this. I mean, for me, working in soccer had always been my dream. It'll always be something that I strive to get to. Work towards it. No one's going to hand you anything. I think for the most part, if you put in the work, you can get out of life what you want. It's not going to be simple, and the road is not going to be, linear all the time, but you can achieve it. You put your head down, do the work, and I feel like you'll get to where you want to be.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.